Let's sell some merch.
Findings on the Lee Harvey Oswald revealed that he died as a result of hemorrhage from the gunshot wound. He was otherwise a healthy male and physically healthy male.
Doctor, by that you mean he didn't have any kind of brain tumors or anything that would cause him to be a mentally deranged person?
No, their brain was normal in configuration, and there was no evidence of any brain tumor or injury to the brain.
The executive order, which forbids every person in this audience and every person listening to this program, which forbids them to look at this evidence until September in the year 2039, was issued by the President of the United States. Does that answer your question? He's suppressing it.
For what possible reason?
Why don't you ask him, John?
Woo! Right on. Way to go, Garrison. That was
so. What possible reason would that be?
Yeah, that was, of course, Johnny Carson on the Tonight Show. Mort Saul expedited that with an appearance a few weeks before. The comedian Mort Saul, who went to work for Garrison down in New Orleans, giving up his ABC local show here in Los Angeles to help Garrison with the investigation.
All right.
That ends up with Garrison being cut off eventually by the producers of The Tonight Show, filing a complaint with the FCC for fair practices, and is awarded 30 minutes of free airtime by NBC News at prime time. And he does 30 minutes about the assassination, fingering LBJ during the 30 minutes because they had cut him off on TV when they used to have fair media practices.
Nice.
Yeah.
We need to find that. Do you have that somewhere? Or?
Of the his yeah, oh yeah, that's available. Yeah, you could see that. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
this with Johnny Carson is hard to find. That little snippet, NBC has destroyed every single copy they lay their hands on, and that's one of the rare snippets of Garrison on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to find that and see if we can put it up on Locals.
Okay.
Because that would be definitely a cool thing for people to watch.
Oh yeah, great thing, and he's free forming it. He's doing it off the top of his head, but a great orator, fantastic orator.
All right, so this, to everyone who's watching, this is obviously part 2. Part 1, we're leading up into the actual assassination itself, and kind of breezed by it a little bit. Now we're going to kind of step back a little bit and again start at the moment of the assassination. It's assassination and beyond. So we're starting out, I believe, with these guys.
Well, let me just interject that we went over the assassination, but we're going to go back with each individual member. Like there's an episode we're going to do on Oswald. There's an episode we're going to do on Ruth Payne. There's an episode we're going to do on Jack Ruby. So in each of those episodes, more information involving them personally will be revealed about the assassination.
Perfect. Sounds
okay.
good.
So this is, again, you're saying Greer, Clint Hill
on the left. I forgot the middle guy's name.
Kellerman.
And Greer on the right.
Okay, so Greer is the oldest of the group. I just want to interject something here. The Attorney General of the United States did not trust the Secret Service because the Secret Service, Rowley, the head of the Secret Service, was really tight with LBJ. And the Attorney General of the United States, Robert Kennedy, did not trust them. And in February of 1963, Robert Kennedy helped sponsor a bill called H.R. 4158. H.R. 4158, House Resolution 4158, would allow the Attorney General to handpick the bodyguards of his own brother. That's how strongly, oh yeah, very rare, nobody knows this. And when LBJ takes over, he kills the bill. And Rowley says his main problem with the bill is that the Attorney General could remove the Secret Service and appoint people he trusted personally to guard the president of the United States, and that could not happen. So the bill was killed. But think about the timing now. February 1963, the Attorney General of the United States controls the FBI, but Bobby Kennedy wanted to use U.S. Marshals that he could trust personally to guard his brother. But let's continue.
Okay. And now, by all accounts, with these guys, the guy on the left, Clint Hill, I believe by all accounts really did try to save him that day.
Yeah, the only one is Clint Hill. In between there, when you see Kellerman, this cat, and Greer was the oldest Secret Service agent, I think, at the time. Greer's the wheelman. Kellerman is sitting shotgun. Kellerman never even turns around as the president's head is being riddled with bullets. Think about that. Normally, they would dive over the seat, cover his body up, as Rufus Youngblood does in the LBJ car, 3 cars back. Youngblood dives over the top and covers the body, which is the first thing you do in training with the Secret Service. Kellerman in the middle there, that scurrilous cat, doesn't even turn to look as multiple shots hit Connolly and JFK, never turns his head. Greer, as people now understand, multiple testimony on Greer of literally hitting the brakes on the limo and almost bringing it to a direct stop as the bullets are flying. Everybody sees the red taillights. Many people say it slowed down to 1 to 2 to 3 miles per hour. It stops the motorcade is the point. Greer hits the brakes instead of doing the opposite, flooring it. He does not do that. When Greer finally turns around is at the time that Kennedy's head has been blown to smithereens, and he sees that and takes off.
Now, also, there was the problem, too, right, that Clint Hill had to catch up to the vehicle to even try to get on it and jump over Kennedy at the time, and they previously were riding on the back of it, but they were told to get off or something.
Right. Well, you see the famous footage of Agent Ripka at the airport when he is on the side of the limo and is waved off by Emory Roberts, who I believe is one of the conspirators, along with Fred Boring, these 2 cats, and James Rowley. I think there's about maybe 5 Secret Service agents in on it. These 2 guys here, Jackie's lead agent. Yeah, he was not in on it, Clint Hill, and he runs to get up on the limo to push her back down, and she's got Kennedy's brains in her hand or part of his skull, and he does his job. These other 2 scallywags, I think, were in on it. Anyway, the night before is really what I wanted to get into, Eric, briefly. The night before is in Fort Worth, Texas, and these Secret Service agents go out to a place called the Cellar. First, they go to the press club, and there's a lot of guys at the press club. This is in Fort Worth. There's a place called the Cellar. The press club closed at 1 a.m., and then a bunch of them continued to drink and went to this place called the Cellar in Fort Worth. Now, the Cellar is the first beatnik club in Texas. And this is 1963. There's no liquor license. They actually have rock bands playing and waitresses who serve in their panties with little pasties on their nipples. If I could be more specific, I would try, but that's one of the attractions of the Cellar. The Cellar attracts a bohemian crowd, and they have no liquor license, but Pat Kirkwood, who's the owner of the Cellar, is a friend. There he is right there, an anti-Castro gun runner, a guy who's a friend of Jack Ruby's. Pat Kirkwood is a very, very scurrilous cat, has an airplane that does things with weapons. He's the owner of the Cellar. Now, when you go to the Cellar, if you get you get the waitress's attention, you will be served white lightning in a glass or a jar at your table, moonshine that Pat Kirkwood has made personally. So apparently doesn't come under Texas law or whatever. Maybe it was illegal. I don't know. But these Secret Service agents are drinking white lightning all night literally came from the Cellar to the motorcade. And a bunch of them lost their IDs. 2 of them lost their guns. They were later castigated by the Warren Commission because Rowley refused to fire them. And Earl Warren, you can read it yourself in the Warren Commission report, says, how come you didn't fire them? And Rowley says, they've been embarrassed enough. I mean, the president's been killed. Have you no decency? Rowley says, they've been embarrassed enough. So here are these guys hungover. They've lost their ID. God knows, because many reports, this is the swearing in of James Rowley right there. Definitely in on it. Okay, I'll tell you this much, which is interesting. When JFK fires the heads of the CIA, oh boy, that's a great photo. That is a great photo.
Look at that. The
Wow.
friendship, the deep,
wow.
the connection. They love each other.
LBJ is so deep state because he's had every single position in the government. I mean, he has burrowed his head into anuses that no man has gone before. But what I was trying to say was, when he fires Allen Dulles and Cabell, the heads of the CIA, what people forget is that JFK also fired the top 5 heads of the Secret Service. And that was U.E. Bauman, who was the head of the Secret Service. And that sent as many shockwaves quietly through the federal deep state government as did the firing of Allen Dulles and Cabell. Nobody remembers that he fired the top 5 Secret Service agents. And one of the reasons he did that was because of Abraham Bolden. And you say to yourself, well, who is Abraham Bolden? Abraham Bolden was a straight shooting guy out of a African-American family in Chicago, handpicked by JFK to be the first African-American Secret Service agent on the force. Abraham Bolden is ostracized by racist Southern Secret Service agents, and he files reports that go nowhere to Rowley saying these are a bunch of good old boys who just go off drinking all the time. He's astonished. He's in the White House detail, by the way, as opposed to the Treasury Department. There's about 20 out of 100 that focus on the White House detail. And that's what Kennedy wants. He wants a African-American, not in Denmark, but obviously in DC, where he, needed someone close to him. So Bolden stumbles onto a plot before the Dallas plot. And this was where I was going with Abraham Bolden. Bolden is involved in busting up a plot involving a guy named Thomas Lavelle. Or Valley. He had a pseudonym as Valley, but also Lavelle. This is Thomas Valley, who was another Oswald type, ex-Marine. They said he was a nut. He was a guy who was up in a building in Chicago, a warehouse with a rifle. Cubans had rented a room, 3 Cubans, and they brought rifles into this hotel. And the landlady called the FBI about the fact that she went into their room and there were 3 high-powered rifles on their beds with scopes in this rooming house. And one of the guys involved in busting that up was Abraham Bolden. And the guy who was supposed to be the shooter, here's actually mugshots of Valley, had the same exact background as Oswald. This was a few weeks, 10 minutes in, mind already blown. Don't go anywhere, knuckle fist. I'm just getting started, bro. Yeah. This guy, Valley, gets arrested, and the Secret Service take him down. The other Cubans escape, and they're allowed to escape. And they have the place surrounded. The Secret Service has the place surrounded. And miraculously, the 3 Cubans escape, leaving their weapons, by the way, in the hotel, or the small hotel that they were in. So Bolden files report after report that don't go anywhere. And they don't even send it to the Secret Service in Dallas. Now, keep in mind, this is early November of 1963. This is not ancient history. He's trying to alert everybody, Bolden. So all of a sudden, Bolden gets charged with embezzlement on some stock fraud beef, and he's arrested and imprisoned by the authorities in Chicago and the FBI. And he's put in jail and he's put on ice. And Bolden becomes like a January 6th guy who can't communicate with anyone. Eventually, when he gets out of jail, he writes a memoir and explains what I'm telling you now. And it became known as the Chicago Plot. This has been reported by others, not just Bolden. What I'm telling you now has been pretty well documented. The Chicago Reader ran a long piece about it in the 70s. So this is stuff that you will not find on PBS. Let me put it that way, or in the LBJ movie with Woody Harrelson. So the plot was that the windows overlooked a Chicago route that he was going to head to Soldier Field, Kennedy, and speak at Soldier Field in Chicago. They canceled that. They canceled that entire event because of this plot, Eric, the Chicago plot, not unlike the Baltimore plot against Lincoln. The echoes of Lincoln run all through this stuff. And I believe that many of these guys studied the background and deep state history of the Lincoln assassination. And there's a lot of parallels involving a lot of people other than LBJ, because I believe it was LBJ, Rowley, obviously some military guys, and J. Edgar Hoover in the cover-up at least.
And Dulles.
And Dulles, I don't know physically, but obviously
his brother.
Part of the problem we're going to get in. Yeah, no. I don't think he's physically involved because he doesn't have an office.
Right.
I'm talking about guys in power. It's key to remember.
I mean, the mayor of Dallas.
Cabell, the mayor of Dallas. Oh, absolutely. Changes the parade route the day before. I mean, we discussed in the last episode the fight over the Trade Mart. October 18th, a woman calls up the Trade Mart and gets a job for Lee Harvey Oswald. That's Ruth Payne, a man she despises, a man she can't stand by her own admission. For some reason, she calls up to get him a job at the Trade Mart on October 18th. Nobody ever did that for me. I started dialing to get me a job. And then when he's in October 18th, the Trade Mart becomes obvious as to where the events are going to happen. And Cabell changes the parade route. And there's a lot of history there. But I just want to get back to one other guy, which is in the Daltex building on the second floor. And that involves what I believe is the shot that comes out of the window in the broom closet there that actually has a window. And that involves a guy named Braden. And Jim Braden, I don't know if you have a picture of Jim Braden. Jim Braden was actually from Beverly Hills. And Eugene Hale Brading was his legal name, also known as Jim Braden. He met at the Caballana Motel the night before with Jack Ruby. And Brading was an acolyte of H.L. Hunt. And Brading is physically arrested moments after the assassination in the Daltex building. And I think many of us believe he was a spotter for the shooter on the second floor for the bullet that hits Kennedy in the right shoulder that only goes in a half an inch. That was a straight shot on a flat trajectory that comes literally out of that flat window there on the second floor. Brading is arrested and brought into police headquarters, by the way. And he says that day that he was meeting with H.L. Hunt, one of Kennedy's arch nemesis, and also one of the funders, obviously, of LBJ, and one of the, we believe, with Murchison and the others, the big Texas oil money that wanted to get rid of Kennedy. But Brading is an interesting guy, and I'll tell you why. When RFK is killed in L.A. in 1968, the police pick up Brading, and he lives in Beverly Hills. He's the only man who's at both assassinations.
Really?
And, oh, yeah. Questioned by LAPD, my friend. Lived on Doheny, was a member of the Beverly Hills Golf Club, and was a mob money runner, basically. He was a bag man for the mob.
So his name will come up again.
Oh, yeah. We're going to hear more about him. Anyway.
So can we get back to the night before?
Oh, yeah. Go back to the night before, because that's where we were, inside the cellar. These guys are sitting there. They're blind drunk. And let me just back up a second. They left Fort Worth firemen at the door in the hotel to guard JFK so they could go out drinking. Now, you remember in the Lincoln case, what happens to Parker? Parker goes out drinking. He leaves the guarding of Lincoln, the same exact bullshit, and goes out drinking. So these guys go out to the cellar. They've already been at the press club and in Fort Worth. Bill Moyers was there testifying. They saw them there drinking. There's a lot of testimony as them being in the press club. When they go to the cellar, which is Pat Kirkwood's subterranean dive there, they all of a sudden, while blind drunk, start to hear the voice of JFK. And they just freak the fuck out. They hear JFK in the cellar coming over the microphone from the stage. And they just go, what the hell? And they freak. And it turns out that it's a comedian impersonating JFK. And who is that comedian, Eric? Who do you think it is?
I have a guess.
Okay, let me tell you who it is. That comedian doing the impersonation that night was a guy who worked at a local radio station, and his name was George Carlin.
That one?
That one. And I know this personally because I talked to Carlin about it 3 years before he passed away when we became close friends. And Carlin told me about that. He was working at a local radio station. That's when he was doing his hippy dippy weatherman routine and was doing impersonations. Yeah, that was about the time of when he had a partner with Burns.
Crazy.
You still with us there, the audience? You still with us? Thank you,
Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
I agree.
Oh, we're telling them now, brother. We're telling them now.
And they're coming fast.
Right. A lot of this stuff, I mean, I've done a lot of research, obviously, but, you know, the mini series that I wrote on LBJ, which is yet to be bought, which I doubt will ever be bought, but we're going to post it on Locals, right, Eric?
We've got the first one there.
First episode is on Locals. The first script, the 2 hours of LBJ.
Oh, and I got to put the follow-up. I'm going to put the follow-up after this.
Okay. All right. So we're in the cellar. These guys lose their guns. They show up the next day for the motorcade. And if you've ever been hungover on moonshine, let me tell you something. It happened to me. And what happened is I remember waking up in the same spot I started drinking in a guy's house and on the floor. And I said, what happened? They said, you had one or two and that was it. You were gone. And no memory, complete blackout. I dusted myself off. I got up. It was Billy. The guy's name was Billy Hoagland, and he made a cider every year. This is up in Windham, New York. Billy Hoagland cider. But I also drank some moonshine in other places with cats from North Carolina who made some White Lightning.
Yeah, they call it peach brandy in the South.
Yeah. The regional chain.
It's in a jelly jar, you know?
Yeah, it was in a jelly jar. It was in a mason
jelly
jar.
Jars.
Never again. Never did it again. It scared the hell out of me. But anyway, so they show up, and these guys are thanks, Cross. These guys are you know, in the motorcade. We see Ripka. We see what happens with Agent Ripka, how he's waved off the motorcade by Emory Roberts like a psycho. And again, of course, they're not on the back where there's handles and footsteps. There's photos of them in Miami when JFK is in Miami, all over that freaking limo. Same car. And this LBJ style of always saying who's dead said something is one of the stories that they said, oh, JFK told us not to be on the car.
Yeah, I was going to say, you okay, can we go over that? You were telling me about that JFK and his cronies all had a routine of saying, oh, such and such told me to...
LBJ and his cronies, not JFK and his cronies. LBJ and his cronies. Yeah, they had a style of lying, some kind of a Texas style, where they would say, somebody told me to do that. And even if it was themselves, the other guy would say, no, that guy told me to do it. And it would go around in a circle jerk and nobody would ever figure it out. Or they would blame a dead guy. That was another thing. So they would blame JFK or someone they knew would not squawk about a secret thing.
Because they blamed JFK, if I recall, for the Secret Service not being on the car.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
Yeah, the claim was that they were in the way of the view or something.
Right. And the motorcycles were pushed all the way back. And we know that we have the testimony of the Dallas Motorcycle Police who were shocked by the people doing this. And it was not JFK himself. It was Secret Service guys, Emory Roberts and Fred Boring, Kellerman and Greer. Those were the guys shooing off the motorcycles. I mean, all of these guys are pushed back from the motorcade, not in other cities. Alec
Baldwin learned from the best, right? Blame the victim. Alec Baldwin learned from the best. Blame the victim.
Yeah, well, it's a typical thing. But they also blame RFK. In other words, when he finally gets a little bit ahead of the curve, when he finally gets on the plane, Air Force One, after the killing, he calls RFK and says, I want to get sworn in. And RFK goes, you're already president. What do you have to get sworn in for? And he says, well, I want to make it legit. Can you send me a copy of the document of the swearing in? And RFK says, all right, I'll have Katzenbach, the assistant AG, send you a copy for what it's worth. Later on, LBJ will insist that RFK demanded that he take the oath of office on that freaking plane. And this is what he does his whole life. I mean, that's why RFK called him a pathological liar. That's why he was called Bullshit Johnson, shortened to Bull Johnson, even when he was a teacher in Texas and then later a congressman. It was called Lying Lyndon. I mean, there's a bunch of different things, but he's clearly a pathological liar. But it's lying with a structure is what I was getting at, Eric.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, it's a good purpose because by the time you go around to everybody, well, they've already moved on to something else. And it's like the whole routine of, no, that didn't happen. No, that didn't happen. No, that didn't happen. And then you go catch them in a corner there. Oh, that's old. Anyway.
Right. Right. Well, one of his henchmen is John Connolly, who's been his campaign manager since day one. You've got people in place here that, yeah, here's Connolly. Connolly, in 1980, Connolly runs for president, by the way. Here's a little side note on Connolly. Later switches parties, becomes a Republican. He was a conservative Democrat, becomes a Republican, is nominated for the Treasury by Nixon. He becomes the Secretary of the Treasury, runs for president in 1980, and refuses Secret Service protection. Now that tells you something. He said, "I'll hire my own people," and that's a great statement by Connolly.
Yeah, you think? Oh man.
Okay, so the bullets start flying. This guy Braden gets arrested afterwards. He's linked to H.L. Hunt. He's in town from Beverly Hills. Whatever the conspiracy is, we'll get into that individually with each guy where they were in later episodes. We'll get into Ruby. We'll get into who was, Mac Wallace up in the building, and then the big Indian Morales and those characters. But for our thing here, for the cover-up by LBJ, I've argued with Oliver Stone about this for years. Most historians, good or bad, non-conspiracy, believe that LBJ was involved in the cover-up for the good of the country. Even completely anti-conspiracy people believe that LBJ was involved. What's that?
Had to at least know.
No, not had to know. It's not what they're saying. That he covered up the crime for the good of the country. In other words, he created the Warren Commission. Everything was a snow job for good intentions because of the Cold War. That's the main. Michael Beschloss, all the mainstream historians will at least grant that. What I have been saying is that he has the means, motives, and opportunity, and it's a right of ascension, political assassination in Texas. He's lured to Texas by him and Connolly. There's plenty of breadcrumbs and dots that could be laid out ad infinitum back to LBJ's door. The fact that he has the heart attack, the fact that the front page of the Dallas Morning paper by Nixon, LBJ to be dropped from ticket in '64 by JFK. In her memoir, Evelyn Lincoln says the last thing JFK told her before he went to Dallas, which, by the way, he fought tooth and nail not to go, was, "I'm going to get rid of LBJ in '64 on the ticket." And that was the last thing he said to Lincoln, Evelyn Lincoln. And he said, "I'll probably use Senator Stuart Symington out of Missouri at that point, or Sanford out of North Carolina." But what happens is, before he even goes, he's already saying this. And there's also incredible testimony by the Smathers, the famous straight up senator from Florida, Smathers, who talked to Kennedy about going to Dallas, and the seating arrangement that we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, the seating arrangement in the death car, how they fought in the hotel in Fort Worth over the seating of Connolly. Okay.
Right.
In this document that I have, Smathers says that JFK told him he wants LBJ wants Jackie to sit with him in his car. And I'm going, dear God, this is beyond even the lowest man on the earth. And of course, he wants Ralph Yarborough to sit in the front seat where Connolly was forced to sit. I mean, Connolly's got to be either the bravest man in America or completely a nut.
Well, because LBJ hated Yarborough. So it was like a two birds with one stone deal.
Oh, yeah. No, right. Absolutely. He wanted Yarborough in that seat, and he loved and wanted that trophy. And we've heard so many phone calls, you and I, of LBJ calling Jackie and trying to seduce her. It's so sick. It's so sick listening to him over the next couple of years trying to seduce her to come back to the White House so he can walk around with her, take a swim with her. It's disgusting. And she hated his guts. She thought it was
photo.
What's that?
Here's a good photo leading into it.
Well, that's the famous wink by the congressman. Yeah. Obviously bizarre, obviously insane. You've got a woman who's got complete shock here on the right, covered with blood. Let me just back up because this will come later. We're not at that point in the story yet aboard the plane. So just back up from that for 1 second, because we'll get to the plane. The plane is fascinating. We're in Parkland Hospital. Everybody races to Parkland Hospital. Limousine is covered with blood. Limousine has a bullet hole right through the front windshield. Numerous witnesses see the bullet hole through the front windshield. Numerous witnesses, nurses, police testify, bullet hole through the front windshield, right? And that's the bullet that hits Kennedy right in the throat. Doesn't penetrate out the back, goes right into his throat, and that's what the doctors at Parkland see the front entrance wound. That's the front shot, straight up, coming from the grassy knoll. Obviously, either a 22 or a 32 is what they were saying, based on the size of the entrance wound, which was really neat. And I believe, as I professed before, that they were suppressors on these guns, reducing the velocity of the entrance wound, because there is no exit wound on that. And it's a fairly close shot. So that lodges in the throat, never exits. The only reason we have a hole in the back of the neck is because, according to the testimony of a guy named Ford, Gerald Ford, he literally changes the autopsy photo to move that hole from the right shoulder over to the back of his neck as an entrance wound, so it would come out the throat. That's Gerald Ford. He's admitted doing that. He's admitted moving and changing the autopsy sketch for the good of the American people, to make it clearer for them. This was his wording, paraphrasing, so the people would understand the angles of the bullet entries and exit wounds. He moves over this 1-inch wound on the back right shoulder, which never traversed, as even the autopsy guy said, in Parkland, and later, and we'll get into Bethesda, but he moves it over to the back of the neck to line up with the wound in the front. That's how Gerald Ford becomes president, by the way, kids. Just so you know who this guy was. He was.
And they had to move it because there was one fewer bullets reported, right?
Right, absolutely, yeah. That's how the magic bullet starts, because once you have the hole in the neck, the entrance wound, when they move the shoulder wound over, that becomes the rear shot that comes out of the throat, and then does all the crazy zigzags into Connolly and everything else. That's the magic bullet. And of course, the magic bullet, which is .399, has slight deformations, which means it was probably shot through the Mannlicher Carcano, the actual gun, into water, most likely. When you get that little amount of deformation of the bullet, was probably shot and then placed on the stretcher.
Actually, it's weird. We saw somebody who was doing a recreation of that, shooting through plastic bottles, and he said that the bullet that he was using actually had more wear on it, even going through the bottles that he shot, which was kind of interesting at the time.
I know, I saw that, and really the only people who had those tanks were like the FBI and certain law enforcement who were able to, do that with water tanks. And the bullet is basically pristine. There's more. Everybody knows this. We don't have to go over this. There's more grains from the bullet in Connolly's wrist than there are missing from .399. It's just a math problem, But I guess with CRT, maybe it's the wrong math or something. I don't really know. But anyway, so the bullets are raining down, and Greer eventually steps on the gas. They go to Parkland, and for some reason, LBJ makes a beeline to Parkland instead of everybody's recommending that he get back on Air Force 2, so the two people are not in the same space at one time. And he wants to be next to the dead Kennedy, if that's a good name for a band. He wants to be there when the guy expires, so he can take presidential control instead of getting on the plane and waiting, because there'll be a communication problem. LBJ's henchman immediately seized control of all the phones in Parkland, cock blocking the Kennedy people from getting any word. Anytime anybody like Kenny O'Donnell tries to get a phone to call back east, they said, "I'm sorry, the phones are tied up. You can't use the phone." So there's no phone communication, and LBJ can't use the phones because he doesn't trust the switchboard operators who he'd have to go through to use those phones. So when they declare Kennedy dead, that's when he says, "Let's get out of here," finally. And then he grabs Jess Curry, the chief of police of Dallas, and they jump in his car and hightail it, but they need the body. And that's where the pushing and shoving starts, with the Secret Service guys who are now calling Johnson Mr. President. And they need to get that body out of Dallas. Now, keep in mind, there's no federal crime for killing a president, Eric, as you know. This is a state crime.
Oh, yeah. It's a murder.
This doesn't exist. This is a state murder.
Right.
And if you showed that Rose clip right at the front end, right? That's the medical examiner. That's the Thomas Noguchi of Dallas. And they rightfully say that this is a murder in Dallas County, and we need that body to do an autopsy. And that's when the machine guns come out. And one of the guys that they start to fight with physically is not Rose, but the FBI agents. They're trying to box out the FBI from stopping them fleeing with the body of JFK. And they need that body. because that is not going to be left behind to do a legitimate autopsy. That body is going to have to go to Bethesda Naval Hospital, where Commander James Humes, who has never done a forensic autopsy in his life, will now, under military supervision, rearrange the autopsy photos and do all the stuff. Here's James Humes. Destroyed his autopsy photos, burned them. It's just a ridiculous case with this guy Humes.
Wow. Now, wasn't there some conflict, though, that he got back to Air Force One and then wasn't going anywhere because he needed the body, and then got into a conflict with this guy? Or
yeah, that's Mchugh. General Mchugh was a chief aide to JFK and a friend of the Bouvier family. What happens is LBJ gets back to the plane. The reason he wants to get back to the plane so fast is to use the phone on the plane. It's a secure line, and only when Air Force One is flying does it automatically record phone calls.
Oh.
And not many people realize that. On the ground, no recording. And he's got free access to call whoever he wants. And instead of going on Air Force Two, which he could have done, he has his luggage transferred from, Air Force Two to Air Force One. He has a sandwich. He has one of his drinks. He begins to unwind because he's finally the most powerful man on the face of the earth. And he keeps saying there's a conspiracy. There's a conspiracy. The Russians are going to kill us all. And what he does is he takes off his shirt, takes off his jacket, and lays down on JFK's bed in the presidential stateroom. And he picks up the phone and starts calling his various henchmen. The first henchman he calls is a guy named Waddy Bullion. This is Waddy Bullion. This is the first man he calls after seeing the head of the president being blown off, right? And you say, well, why would he call Waddy Bullion? Waddy Bullion was his tax lawyer. And he tells Waddy Bullion, we have to sell my shares of Halliburton, which was then called Brown and Root, which are the two guys. Here's Waddy Bullion in the middle there. He calls Bullion and says, how's the market doing? And he says, well, it's way down, Lyndon. It's way down. And he says, well, it's not as far down as when FDR died. So they both have a chuckle that somehow JFK is not as important as FDR because the market has not plummeted as far down as it did on the announcement of FDR's death. I can't make this up. Anyway, so Lyndon Johnson tells Waddy Bullion to sell his shares in Brown and Root, which he does. That's the first call he makes. And he's laying there and he's scratching his balls and he's got his shirt off and he's stretched out on JFK's bed. Okay. Now you say, well, that's weird enough. Then a thing happens that bothers me to this day. I get choked up even thinking about it. I hate to even say what happened. It really chokes me up. The door opens and it's completely blood-drenched Jackie Kennedy. And they see each other and they're startled by the presence of each other. And LBJ grabs his shirt and jacket and tries to get dressed, apologizing as quickly as possible. And she says, I'm sorry. And she's in shock, obviously covered with blood. And she doesn't, all she wants to do is get in there. Yeah. Or not clean up, as the story goes. She said, let them see what they did to my husband, the famous quote. Because when LBJ leaves, he comes back with his wife, with Lady Bird, and they bring in a white dress for her to wear for the swearing in. And she doesn't know what's going on. And she says, I want to wear these clothes. I want them to see what they did to my husband, and refuses to put on the white dress that LBJ and his wife picked out for her. An astounding moment. And this
is in her memoirs too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. All this stuff is pretty well documented at this point. So JFK, she goes into the stateroom. LBJ comes out. He moves up to the front of the plane. Meanwhile, all these guys, the Kennedy guys, Kenny O'Donnell and the Irish Mafia guys, are all in the back of the plane with the coffin, Eric, right? And they think that they don't even know that LBJ is on the plane because this is Air Force One. They believe, and he came in on Air Force Two, that he's gone. They thought he flew to Washington, which is the protocol in an emergency. Now, keep in mind, the entire cabinet is flying over the South Pacific at this time. They've been removed from Washington. There's nobody left in the cabinet. One man is left, and that man is in the Situation Room, and we're going to get to him in a couple of seconds. That man was Commander Oliver Hallett of Office of Naval Intelligence. In a couple of minutes, we'll get to him. But LBJ is in the front of the plane, and everybody's going, what are we doing here? The plane has no air conditioning. It's not because, when you're sitting on the ground and there's no air circulation.
Sure.
People are dying in there. They're just dying. And he says, I want to be sworn in. He calls up RFK and tells RFK he wants to be sworn in. And RFK goes, what? What are you talking about? And he says, yeah, I want to be sworn in. Now, this is really bizarre, but he tells them to bring in this Judge Hughes, who he knows from Texas, and she's miles away. Now they're waiting for this obscure local judge to show up to do an official swearing in of a man who's already legally the president of the United States. And everyone in the back of the plane is wondering what's going on here. Why is this plane? This is an hour and a half. Think about this. You've got the dead body. You've got the widow covered with blood. You've got his group. They're in complete shock. They're in the back of the plane. They don't know why they're taking off. So General Mchugh, that picture you showed, if you could put that up there again of General Mchugh, Brigadier General Mchugh, he goes to the front of the plane, to the cockpit. I think his name was Stockton, was the pilot. And he goes, why the effing is this plane not taking off? And he says, I have orders from the president not to take off. And Mchugh goes, my president is lying in a box in the back of this plane. Get this thing effing airborne. And Stockton says, I can't. The president told me not to fly the plane. And he goes, what are you talking about? And he says, Johnson. He goes, what about Johnson? He goes, he's on the plane. And Mchugh goes, what? And he storms back to the stateroom to find Johnson. And he opens the door, that same stateroom, no Johnson. He opens the door to the bathroom, and there's Johnson on the toilet, sobbing and hysterical, according to Mchugh's memoirs. And he says, snap out of it. What the hell is wrong with you? And he smacks him in the face. And Mchugh says in his memoirs that he was yelling that the Russians are going to kill us all. And it was a crock of shit. It was something that LBJ used to do when he was out machoed by someone. This was one of his techniques. He did it with RFK during the vice presidential naming ceremony in the Biltmore Hotel in LA. He did the same thing. He started crying. And it's an act. When he has a guy that he can't bully, he becomes like a crying little girl. And it's an act. It's a complete act. That's what he does with Mchugh. And Mchugh's a tough SOB. And Mchugh grabs him by the lapels and says, snap out of it. And he leaves, goes back to the O'Donnell and back to the Irish Mafia guys and tells them what happened. And they're going, what? And so LBJ finally says, when the following event happens, the judge showing up and the swearing in happens, that's when he calls for Jackie Kennedy to come out of the stateroom and stand next to him, this woman who's in complete shock, by the way, covered with blood, for no reason to be in the official photo. And then he winks at the Congressman Albert, who is one of his henchmen from Texas. That's the famous wink by Congressman Albert, that good job doing that. One of the craziest things you've ever seen. I mean, here's the dead body of the president in the back of the plane. Here's his widow covered with blood. And Albert, who was picked up by Jess, the chief of police, and LBJ in the getaway car. He sees him on the road and he goes, there's Congressman Albert. And he throws him in the back of the police car. And Jesse Parker puts on the siren and LBJ tells him to turn off the goddamn siren. They're going to kill us all. What are you, an idiot? And for some reason, the chief of police will not leave the side of LBJ from the second this happens. And everyone said, shouldn't you be investigating the murder? You're the chief of police of Dallas. And he will not leave. And he pushes his way, and right in back of LBJ is chief of police Jess Parker from Dallas. And he's pushing his way into the photo. That, in fact, I think that's his chin underneath there with the glasses, which you'll see in more famous photos. But the point of the matter is, the chief of police never bothers to even investigate the crime in real time. Doesn't go back to the crime scene. Doesn't do anything.
By the way, if you look at LBJ,
he's smiling in that photo.
Yeah, he has a Duchenne grin, meaning a legitimate smile. You'll see his eyes are crinkling.
Yep.
As well as the congressman. Those are genuine smiles. It is not, those are happy people there.
That's and the little guy down at the bottom.
Obviously
Yeah, the
She's
little guy
shell-shocked.
down at the bottom is Jack Valente, who becomes head of the Motion Picture Association of Hollywood. And this is Sarah Hughes, the woman swearing him in, the judge, who he tried to get a federal nomination for under JFK, and they said no way. She was just a local judge out of Austin or Dallas, I think. But she drove to get there, which was one of the reasons he held up the plane. And then after it was over, he said, "Okay, let's get airborne now," and celebrated with his cronies. I swear to God, in the front of the plane. It's inexplicable what he was doing, but he knew that he was untouchable at this point, and he changes, his whole persona changes in front of everyone. And he begins to call up Kenny O'Donnell and his other guys, asking them if they'll work with him in the new administration. And these guys are going, "Please, sir, this is not the time to discuss this." And he will not stop discussing it with them. And they just go, "Look, we can't even talk to you. We've just had our friend's head blown off, a guy we've known for 25 years.
What was that chief's name again?
Jess Parker?
Jesse Curry?
Jesse Curry. I'm sorry, not Parker. Jesse Curry. Yeah, there's a shot of him. There's obviously Valente. That's LBJ's wife there. Yeah. Curry, interestingly enough, like I said, does not leave his side the entire time. He drives the getaway car from Parkland at high speed with LBJ in there. When any Secret Service guy could have done, he has absolutely no authority dealing with LBJ. No legal authority. The Secret Service is there. Rufus Youngblood is in back of him, the personal Secret Service agent of LBJ. And Curry is there to do his bidding to now cover up the crime, which we're going to get into.
All right.
Now we're going to get into this, because when this plane becomes airborne, I'm sorry this is going really fast for people. You may have to watch this. Okay.
Watch it a couple times. We'll get the views. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it's going really fast, but there's a lot of facts here. I want to get in on this. The plane gets airborne, and as it gets airborne, the first call that comes over the PA is from this guy, Commander Oliver Hallett. And if you could find a photo of Commander Oliver Hallett, I think you'll begin to understand what's going on here. Because Oliver Hallett is the only guy left in the Situation Room in D.C. And Oliver Hallett calls up the plane. This is as it gets airborne, right? And he says, quote, no conspiracy, announces Oswald's been arrested. Says it 3 times. No conspiracy exists moments after the plane is airborne, after the swearing in. This allows LBJ to drop all the conspiracy BS that's being propagated by him himself and start to begin. There's Oliver Hallett. Now you say, what's so interesting about Oliver Hallett, Eric?
It's like the skipper.
Right. Looks like the skipper on McHale's Navy, right? But he's not. Oliver Hallett was an ONI operative, one of the heads of the ONI, Office of Naval Intelligence. And Oliver Hallett was stationed just 2 years before, or maybe even a year before this event, in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. And when a guy comes in who denounces his citizenship and throws his passport at him, he gets into a fight with that guy. And that guy's name was Lee Harvey Oswald. And Oliver Hallett said, "You son of a bitch," and begins to go at Oswald and is separated by the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador in the Moscow embassy when he denounces his U.S. citizenship and throws his passport, which many people believe was a false flag event, staged event that Oswald was doing for the Soviets. But this is the guy, Oliver Hallett, who somehow gets from the Moscow embassy, U.S. embassy, to the Situation Room to announce that Oswald has been apprehended. And this is like 5 minutes after, wow, this is like 5 minutes after Oswald is apprehended, and LBJ says, "Oh, there's no conspiracy." Great. And when they get back to Washington on the plane, when they land, RFK runs on, blows past LBJ to embrace Jackie, and rightfully so, that they're completely tragically shredded by the events. But the first guy to greet LBJ is James Rowley, the head of the Secret Service, who never leaves his side for the next number of weeks, right? And Rowley is with him on his side, and you'll see him subtly in photos. You know what I mean? I don't know if you see him at the airport when LBJ, I don't know if there are photos of it, some footage of obviously Rowley. But when he begins to he doesn't go into the Oval Office the first night. He goes into the vice presidential office, and he begins to get on the blower with various people to begin the cover-up. And the first people that his crew starts calling are the Dallas officials. And LBJ the next morning calls up Captain Will Fritz. I don't know if you have a picture of Captain Will Fritz. He's the head of homicide of Dallas PD. And Will Fritz, excuse me?
I do. Hang on.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Oh, yeah. There's Will Fritz. And he is an old, brilliant investigator and apparently has solved so many homicides that he's a legend in Dallas. And he's the guy interrogating Oswald. And LBJ tells him 3 times, "You've got your man, stop the investigation." 3 times he tells him on the phone. Now, here's LBJ, the president of the United States, telling this guy to stop the investigation. What's it to LBJ? What does he care? What does he care? What this guy's doing with Oswald? Oswald could have told him all kinds of sidebar crap, during the interrogation. Could have told him a lot of stuff. Okay. Then Cliff Carter, one of the henchmen of LBJ, he calls up Wagon A Car, who is the attorney general of the state. Connolly calls Wagon A Car. The governor calls Wagon A Car, the attorney general of the state of Texas, and tells, is this Wagon A Car?
Yes.
Okay. He gets a call from Connolly. "You got your man. There's no conspiracy. Stop the investigation." Okay. Cliff Carter calls up DA Wade, the district attorney of Dallas. This is all simultaneous. This is all that night and into the next morning. Calling up Wade, the DA. Here's the DA, Wade, who obviously was a corrupt son of a bitch. And Carter tells him to stop the investigation on behalf of the president of the United States. And Wade talks about this again in his memoirs. Most of this stuff has been discussed years later in their various memoirs and interviews.
Wow.
Okay, so he's shutting it down. And now he wants to have a bullshit blue ribbon commission. And that becomes the Warren Commission. People call him, Katzenbach talks to him and says, "We need to get the American people to believe that Oswald was a lone assassin." This is from Katzenbach. This is in print. J. Edgar Hoover does the same thing. And they begin, except there's one problem, Eric. There's one problem, and that's Mexico City. And that Mexico City operation becomes a problem for J. Edgar Hoover because in Mexico City, which is the Casablanca of this time period. Yeah, we got to keep it going, Kenny. Thank you. Oh yeah, I forgot where the purple cup is already. I'm gonna take a hit off this cough medicine, by the way. So hold on for a second. Okay, so where was I?
DA moving on, shutting down investigation.
Okay, so the Warren Commission has.
Mexico. We're at Mexico.
Yeah, we're Mexico
Mexico's
City.
the
We're
problem.
a guy named the head of the Western Hemisphere of the CIA is a guy named David Atlee Phillips, and David Atlee Phillips hates JFK's guts because he was the one who trained the Cubans who were in Miami. He was the leader of the Bay of Pigs, and many of the men that Phillips oversaw were killed in the Bay of Pigs screwed up invasion, and he blames JFK like a lot of people did. But Phillips is not fired when Bissell and Cabell and Dulles are fired. He remains the station chief of the Western Hemisphere. A lot of power out of Atlee Phillips. Total alcoholic, kicked out of 2 schools for alcoholism, even when he was in 2 colleges younger. His brother became a screenwriter, by the way, who wrote Thunder Road with Robert Mitchum. I don't if that matters. And he later wrote a novel called Night Watch, David Atlee Phillips, which is about $500 on eBay. If you could find Night Watch, I think I might have a PDF of it. If we could put it up, I'll try to find it. A novel by him after he retired. But anyway, Phillips is framing Oswald in Mexico City. And he's framing him by having Oswald go to the Cuban embassy in Mexico City and then the Soviet embassy in Mexico City and go back and forth trying to get a visa to go to Cuba, to Havana. This is a fake out. He's not in Mexico City. This is the photos that are released are of another guy. The audio of the man calling as Oswald is not Oswald. This has been revealed. And this whole setup is done September 18th, way before the assassination. They're already laying the footprints for Oswald and the frame of Oswald on September 18th. Unfortunately for them, Oswald is in Austin, and he's also in New Orleans August 18th. So they changed the date to September 28th, and he's not even down there on September 28th. So the frame itself becomes a problem because J. Edgar Hoover is not in on it, Eric. And he, in a famous call, which is the night of the assassination, which has now since been erased, he calls up LBJ, and he tells him, LBJ asks him about the problem in Mexico City. And in this little dialogue that Eric and I are going to read, we're going to read the dialogue because the tape has been erased. You can listen to the tape, but all you're going to hear is air. So the transcripts exist. And I remember hearing the tape at one point. They've since been erased. And luckily, we have the transcripts, which we're going to read at this point. It's short, but we're going to have this one conversation here. And I am going to play the part of J. Edgar Hoover, a cross-dressing gay man, or I guess is the only way to describe him. And Eric will play the part of LBJ. If that's
and I know everybody's disappointed because they love your LBJ impersonation, but
I'll do it later. But right now, there's I'm going to play J. Edgar Hoover. So okay, this is at 10:01 Saturday a.m. Saturday, November 23rd. It was recorded, later transcribed, then of course erased. J. Edgar Hoover. I just wanted to let you know of a development which I think is very important in the connection with this case. This man in Dallas, Lee Harvey Oswald, we, of course, charged him with the murder of the president. The evidence that they have at the present time is not very, very strong. We have just discovered the place where the gun was purchased and the shipment of the gun from Chicago to Dallas to a post office box in Dallas to a woman by the name of A. Hydell. Now, the reason he mentions a woman is because that gun was picked up at that post office by Ruth Paine, which we'll get into later in the Ruth Paine episode. We had it flown up last night, and our laboratory here is making an examination of it, Eric.
Yes, I told the Secret Service to see that got taken care of. That's
right. We have the gun and we have the bullet. There was only one full bullet that was found. That was on the stretcher of the president. Was on. It apparently had fallen out when they massaged his heart, and we have that one. We have what we call slivers, which are not very valuable in the identification. As soon as we finish the testing of the gun for fingerprints, we will then be able to test the one bullet we have with the gun. But the important thing is that the gun was bought in Chicago on a money order. It cost $21, and it seems almost impossible to think that for $21, you could kill the president of the United States. Note that no comments were made about the other bullet retrieved from the body, according to witnesses below. LBJ.
Now, who is this A. Hydell?
Oh, A. Hydell is an alias that this man has used on other occasions, and according to the information we have from the house in which he was living with his mother, he kept a rifle like this wrapped up in a blanket. Now, this is the house. His mother is really Ruth Paine, who says that it was her house, not his mother. This is where he's living or visiting his wife, who is living in a lesbian relationship with Ruth Paine at that time. On the morning that this incident occurred down there yesterday, the man who drove him to the building where they work, the building from where the shots came, said that he had a package wrapped up in paper. Now, this is Wesley Buell Frazier, who drove Oswald to work with him at the Texas School Book Depository. Wesley Buell Frazier, who's going to have his own episode, was arrested and charged with the killing of the president of the United States. He was the only man other than Oswald charged with the actual murder of the president. He was lie detected twice by Dallas PD. They found a British Enfield rifle and ammunition in his house, and they scared him to death. He was 21 years old with the electric chair in Texas, saying he was going to go to the electric chair. And they got him to flip to do their bidding because Wesley Buell Frazier's mother who was there that morning, gave the FBI a report that LBJ, that Oswald had indeed no package, no curtain rods, no gun. He just had a sandwich in a little lunch bag that he put into his pocket. That's from the mother of Wesley Buell Frazier. And you can read that document from the FBI. And that's why the FBI was a problem from the Secret Service. They did legitimate investigation and took down actual statements spreading out around Dallas, Eric. But to finish up, but the important thing at the time is that the location of the purchase of the gun by a money order, apparently to the Klein Gun Company in Chicago, we were able to establish that last night.
Have you established any more about the visit to the Soviet embassy in Mexico in September?
Okay, so here is the key. How does LBJ know about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's one angle that's very confusing for this reason. We have up here in D.C., the tape and the photograph of the man who was at the Soviet embassy using Oswald's name. Now, using Oswald's name, that statement by J. Edgar Hoover indicates a conspiracy right there. Any man in September 18th, September 28th, using his name to go into the embassy, nobody knows who this guy is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That picture and the tape do not correspond to this man's voice or to his appearance. In other words, the photographs that are now famous showing the guy that they photographed coming out of the embassy obviously is not Oswald. The CIA station chief, David Atlee Phillips, sent those photos to J. Edgar Hoover, clearly indicating they were framing Oswald. We do have a copy of a letter which was written by Oswald to the Soviet embassy here in Washington, inquiring as well as complaining about the harassment of his wife and the questioning of his wife by the FBI. Let me just interject here. That letter was typed, not written by hand, by Ruth Payne, not written, typed by Ruth Payne in that house on the typewriter in that house and sent to her by mail by her. Okay. Now, of course, that letter information, we process all mail that goes to the Soviet embassy. It's a very secret operation. No mail is delivered to the embassy without being examined and opened by us so that we know what they receive. The case as it stands now isn't strong enough to be able to get a conviction. There it is, my friend. There it is. Soviet. Now, if we can identify this man who was at the Soviet embassy in Mexico City, this man, Oswald, has still denied everything. He doesn't know anything about anything, but the gun thing, of course, is a definite trend. And with that lays the seeds of the conspiracy to frame Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico City. And this is uncovered by the House Assassinations Committee in the 70s when they open up. Thank you, South Texas gal.
Oh, yeah.
Unbreaded South Texas girl with a beautiful cat. Thank you. This part of the plot, if you could take apart the plot in a million different Achilles heels, but nothing takes apart the plot than having the head of the FBI saying this is not Lee Harvey Oswald in September down in Mexico City, trying to get a visa. What they were attempting to do was frame Oswald, frame Cuba, frame the Soviet Union for the murder of JFK. But when LBJ becomes president, he doesn't need this plot any longer. He is now the most powerful man on the face of the earth. And because of that, he calls off the dogs. And you begin to see the unraveling of the conspiracy concept that the Soviets were involved, that Castro was involved. He doesn't want any part of this. What he wants is, and he's already done it, he's stopped Dallas. He's stopped law enforcement in Texas. He drove a stake. That's why the assassination had to be done in Texas. He couldn't control Illinois. He couldn't control the plot in Miami that happened the same year. He couldn't control Chicago. But goddamn, he can control Texas. And in April of that year, when him and Connolly go to JFK into coming back in the fall, that opened the door to the bloodthirsty killing in Dallas that happened on November 22nd. That was him and Connolly beginning to trap JFK into the plot. This could not be done in another state. This had to be done in the state of Texas. And these guys Let me tell you something. These guys like Will Fritz, forget about Curry. Curry's obviously a lapdog. I mean, he's like, many big city chiefs of police who are appointed, but not Will Fritz. And Wade would later become a corrupt DA, but Wade wanted that scalp. He wanted the electric chair for Lee Harvey Oswald. He wanted to send him down to Texas to the electric chair and have him fry. He wanted that recognition. And so did Carl Wagoner, the attorney general. But when you have the governor wounded, okay, you say, let's take a look at Connolly's outfit, right? Because that's evidence. That's evidence in the case. Where do the bullets enter? Where do they leave?
Oh, that's right.
That's right, Eric. You forgot about that.
Mhm.
Cliff Carter shows up at the hospital, his top underling, and says, give me Connolly's clothing. So they go, what? He goes, yeah, on the orders of the president of the United States. He gets the clothing. Connolly's still in the hospital, right? Under machine gun guard. And the machine gun guard is to stop Connolly from talking to the media or saying something stupid. And what does Cliff Carter do? Takes the suit, the shirt, and brings it to the dry cleaners and has it dry cleaned. And all of that stuff unravels, all the blood, everything's gone from Connolly's clothing. And just one of the incredible minute details that these guys thought of to cover up every little miniature aspect. Now, let's go back to the car. The car is the crime scene. When it's at Parkland, they put the top on it. People begin to see the bullet hole through the windshield. The place, it's inside is blood. The Secret Service, Boring and Emery Roberts, order nurses to go get buckets of water and soap and water and clean the inside of the limo. And the nurses go to get the buckets of water. This is unbelievable. This is moments after they wheeled in the president of the United States. But the nurses come out and they don't have enough time to do the bidding of the Secret Service. So the Secret Service seals up the vehicle and doesn't let anybody look inside. They surround the crime scene, right? Mm-hmm. Secret Service drives, and I think it's either Roberts or Boring or one of the minor guys, drives the limousine to the plane, puts it on the plane, takes it back to D.C. The next day, that plane is first flown to Cincinnati, which is the Ford Motor Company's windshield division, where the windshield is taken out and replaced. It's then flown to Dearborn, where the entire interior and car is redone inside and out. This is the actual crime scene. There's no reason to move that car. That car could have been examined for months by investigators. Sure. The next freaking day, that windshield has got to go. And that is in the White House garage. Only one man has the authority to do any of this stuff. One man. All of this stuff can only be done by one man. And because that one man is now president of the United States and the lead suspect of his murder, all of these machine and wheels start turning. And anytime any of his underlings are questioned, whether it's Cliff Carter or any of them, they simply say, the president's going to have to call you, which he does. And when Oswald gets shot by Ruby, he calls up Crenshaw, one of the doctors in Parkland, and tells him, this is the president of the United States, and I want to get a deathbed confession out of Lee Harvey Oswald. And what he really wants is one of his men who is in the operating room, who's got a gun sticking out of his back pocket to make sure Oswald doesn't spill the beans as he's dying. And that's really the point of the deathbed confession. He wants to talk to Dr. Shires, and Dr. Shires is doing surgery on Oswald, trying to save his life. So Crenshaw says, look, Mr. President, we're all feverishly working here in the operating room. I'll tell Dr. Tom Shires that you called, and I'll tell him. So he goes in. This is Crenshaw. And he tells Shires, the president just called. And Shires goes, what? He says, yeah, he wants to get a deathbed confession out of Oswald. And Shires goes, I can't be bothered with this crap. And there's a guy right there in a green smock with a mask with a gun sticking out of his back pocket with a notepad. And that's one of the Secret Service guys reporting to LBJ if and when Oswald makes a deathbed confession, which he doesn't. He expires and he dies. And they then claim that Crenshaw made up the entire call. They call Crenshaw a liar. They try to revoke his license. This has the earmarks and echoes of today's COVID activity. They try to suspend his license. They say he never got a call from LBJ. LBJ denies calling him until years later when the switchboard operator says she couldn't take it anymore, what they were doing to poor Dr. Crenshaw, and publicly comes out and says, I took that call that day at Parkland. And Crenshaw has been severely maligned by the medical establishment and the political establishment in Texas. LBJ did call that day, and Crenshaw took that call. And he was finally vindicated. And he's got a great book out. If you can find the book by Crenshaw, I forget the title of it, but it's his memoir about what happened that day with LBJ calling the operating room.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I think that you presented a pretty good case.
It's part of the case. It's not the whole case. There's obviously a lot more to it. But
we're going to be going into details as individuals come up and down the line.
Yeah, we're going to go. I just wanted to get into the cover-up, and then obviously he appoints the Warren Commission, which we'll get into a little later. This is the cover-up because he appoints Dulles, to be the overseer. Warren is like a nitwit who he browbeats into submission, saying, you don't want the Russians killing us all. He uses the nuclear weapon, the nuclear attack thing to his advantage whenever he can. He uses it with Earl Warren, scaring him and intimidating.
Still
Earl.
Using it. I mean, think about it, because like Oliver believes it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Is there any one of these characters that is still Ruth Payne's still alive? She lives up in Northern California. Absolutely. Her son lives across the street from her. And Michael Payne, her husband, lives up in Northern California. Both of them CIA. Both of them still alive. Ruth Payne, who had her lesbian film seized by Dallas police when they searched her home. And she also had, Michael Payne had the same exact camera as Oswald, the one that I have, the West German tiny little military camera, the tiny one. But yeah, Ruth Payne is still alive. Oliver told me he regrets changing her name in the movie JFK, but she was so litigious that she threatened to sue if her name was in the movie. So he did change her name in the movie JFK, and he regrets it to this day. He told me he really does. He knew he should have used her name and taken the lawsuit and got her deposed, and he just chickened out. He didn't want any trouble out of her, but he does regret it to this day. He told me.
All right, thank you, Michael Henley.
Thank you, Michael Henley.
Don't know the meaning of the amount, but cool.
I love that dog. I love that dog. That dog can hunt. All right, so where are we now? Do we use all the photos?
We used most of them.
Here, I got to take a little.
Use most of them.
Voice, people.
I think some of them we'll be going into probably more later.
We got Hallett, Commander.
We got
Hallett. We got that
death shot.
You got that. Yeah, we'll get into that a little later. Oath of office, top 5.
We got Raleigh. We got Curry. We got Connolly. Jack Ruby will do when we do Jack.
Oh, I just want to add that the Garrison thing that he's referring to, with Garrison on the Tonight Show, was Executive Order 11652. And that sealed all the evidence by LBJ till 2039. And that story alone caused so many people to look at LBJ for the first time as a real possibility. He took a lot of heat for doing that at the time, editorially. And I don't know if you've got that statement. Did I give you those statements that were floating around? If you could put that up on the screen.
The quotes?
Those quotes. Yeah, when we could end with that, because we've been on for a long time here. Those quotes about the assassination. The first one is from Arthur Kroc, who's a New York Times columnist. And he wrote, in October of 1963, the CIA's growth has likened to a malignancy, which the very high official was not sure even the White House could control any longer. This is Kroc interviewing somebody in the White House. If the United States government ever experiences an attempt at a coup to overthrow the government, it will come from the CIA and not the Pentagon. That's from the New York Times, literally 2 months before the assassination. And this is from Hoover. This is the night of Oswald's death, Sunday, November 24th, 1963. The only thing I am concerned about is having something issued so we can convince the public that Oswald was the real assassin. Now, the reason this is important is the end of that conversation that you and I read. He has no belief that Oswald could be convicted in court. He has no belief that Oswald is the guy. He has no belief, and he knows there's a frame job out of Mexico City. But literally overnight, LBJ privately talks to him again in numerous conversations, saying we have to indicate to the American people and end this conspiracy mumbo jumbo and point every part of the deep state at Oswald. And that's why he says this on Sunday, November 24th, completely contradicting himself from 2 days earlier. And here's Katzenbach, 12 hours, and Monday after Oswald's death. The public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin, that he had no Confederates that are still at large, and that evidence was such that he would have been convicted at trial. Speculation about Oswald's motivation ought to be cut off. That's the Attorney General, Deputy Nicholas Katzenbach, very similar to Stanton and the group involved with Lincoln. Right, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
That Booth and the other conspirators has got to be cut off at the head. And finally, January 14th, 1964, 2 months later, okay, this is J. Edgar Hoover responding to his deputy directors. Okay, but I hope you are not being taken in. I can't forgive the CIA withholding the French espionage activities in the USA and the false story, which is Oswald's trip to Mexico City, only to mention 2 instances of double dealing. This is J. Edgar Hoover talking internally to his deputy directors about his problems with the CIA manipulating him and blocking him from doing his job. He is constantly in battle with the CIA at this point. And finally, Robert Kennedy Robert Kennedy Jr. We could end with this. This is January 11, 2013. Robert Kennedy Jr. on Charlie Rose, which was not broadcast, it was sealed by PBS, refused to air this episode. He goes on with his sister, Kathleen, Charlie Rose, if you remember this, in Dallas, and he says, I am convinced the second gunman was involved in killing my uncle. My father believed that the Warren Commission report was a shoddy piece of craftsmanship. He publicly supported the Warren Commission report, but privately he was dismissive of it. And then his father, this is days before he's killed in Los Angeles, his father, to a crowd at San Fernando Valley State College here in Los Angeles, finally says the famous quote, I now fully realize that only the powers of the presidency will reveal the secrets of my brother's death. And he is shot 2 days later and killed at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, California.
On that happy note, which is going to be coming up in an upcoming episode, not immediately.
Right.
But the LBJ stuff, as everybody can see, there's a lot here and there's a lot to go over. It's a bit of work to go through. So in the
do people
meantime,
subscribe to this, or do we have to keep talking into outer space?
I don't know. There's a button. There's a button, folks. Hit
do
the
people
button.
Subscribe to our channel, or everybody's just going, this is
so.
the greatest channel I've ever seen? And I appreciate the accolades. I mean, they're wonderful. But I'm wondering if people can subscribe or they could share it. I'm not as smart about YouTube or how this works. I'm really just a journalist who's gone off the rails. But you know how this system works. I really don't. I understand how PayPal and Venmo, that seems to be able to buy me more books and coffee and cough syrup, which I love.
And by the way, we have been getting donations coming in there.
Yes. I really appreciate
it.
I really appreciate it. The donations are great on PayPal and Venmo. Also, you can follow me at Lord Buckley if you haven't already on Twitter, which is a lot of fun. And Eric, has somehow developed a line of swag that is really good. I bought a bunch of the stuff the other day: sweatshirts, T-shirts, America's Untold Stories, and coffee mugs. And what else is down there, Eric?
Coffee mugs, hats, sweaters, like a hoodie. It's colder weather.
Right.
Bags, tote bags, glasses. I want that mason jar glass to come in.
You love that mason jar.
Because then you have like a Diet Coke in it or something, and then it'll, it's a nice black background with the logo on it. I just think it looks cool.
A lot of people have demanded a purple cup, Eric. I mean, what is the status of the demands of the people?
I can't find a drop shipper, and I'm not going to do it myself. That's the truth.
We'd have to mail out every purple cup.
Right. If we bought it, we'd have to buy it in quantity, and then we'd have to be shipping them out. And
how about having the Chinese do it? Can they? I know they have supply line problems, but can we get the Chinese to mail out?
I need the Chinese labor to do it. That's for sure. But I don't know. But most of all, folks, locals. Mark's putting a bunch of stuff up
Oh,
there.
yeah,
He put some
I put a
rare
lot
books
of
up
stuff.
there.
Yeah, I put up
And-
some free rare books the other day, PDFs. They're all
And
out of
those are
print.
free, by the way. I
Yeah.
mean, that's in the free part. So we don't just sit there and hide everything behind the
No,
paywall.
no.
There's
I
a
want
lot of
people.
free.
Look, man, I want people to know this. I'm not going to be around forever, and I'm not taking this shit to the grave. You know, whatever I've learned, I'm passing on. That's why I'm doing this goddamn show. The whole series is about stuff that I've uncovered after, 30 years of research, reading between the lines, trying to get projects made, being cockblocked by Hollywood. And finally, I said, I'm just going to bring it directly to the American people without any of these gatekeepers any longer. That was the idea behind America's Untold Stories. Some of them are personal, and others are projects that I've been trying to get made to no avail in Hollywood, going up and ending up in federal court with the CIA, with the recruit, with Spyglass. Get the Chinese to do it. Yeah, get the America's Chinese Untold Stories. We're not doing Scandinavia yet. I'll tell you that much. If we go international, right, we may have to do a sideshow.
I know he
right?
keeps donating though. I mean, if he keeps it up,
These
he
people
may
in
pay for our
Denmark
trip
love the
to
show.
Denmark.
I don't know. We're huge in
I'm telling you.
Denmark. I'd like to go
Exactly.
over there at some point. Maybe they'll give us a parade in Copenhagen.
There you go.
Who knows what the support is like over there overseas.
We know one person in Denmark.
Who
Yeah.
Yeah, very good, loyal supporter. And people keep, how many followers do we have now, by the way? Do you know offhand on locals?
Locals are like 4,500 people.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know. I had no
Yeah.
idea. I had no idea. Wow, that's a lot of people. And we're going to do the thing with Viva and Barnes. I was just sick last week. I'm sorry. We could have done the 4-man Texas death match with Viva and Barnes, but I couldn't get out of bed, so I apologize for that. But we will reschedule that. It's a free fall, anything goes, no rules.
If you've seen them, there's a couple out there. Check them out.
There's a couple out there with me and Viva and Barnes and
here we go.
Jan. Oh, I'm packing my bags right now.
No kidding.
Got to get over to Denmark. Are you kidding me? I've had a lot of good fun. And
well, not right now though. I think
no, I got to stay here. But I'll tell you this: I got off a train in Copenhagen, and there was a huge fishbowl. This is a side story. Huge fishbowl.
Here,
I sub local. Oh, thank you, RR. There was a huge fishbowl on the desk of the information desk. Huge fishbowl, clear fishbowl, and in the fishbowl were filled to the brim were condoms. At the train station, right? And I went up and I said 3,216, and they go, "What?" I said, "You're supposed to guess the amount, right?" And the guy looked at me like I was crazy, and I was obviously being sarcastic. And they said, "No, I don't know how many are in there." And I said, "How many can I take?" And he says, "Take as many as you want." So I reached in, took a handful, but I said 3,216, thinking you'd win something by the government of Denmark if you got the right number of condoms in the fish.
I thought it was a jelly bean jar.
It was a jelly bean jar, right? And I have a lot of fond memories of Denmark. I really enjoy going over there. I haven't been there in a while, but I love it over there.
Well, sounds amazing, folks.
What do we got coming up? What do we got?
Baldwin on Friday. We're going to talk about the Vanity Fair article and
the Vanity Fair article
and go through that.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a wrap up because it looks like there's not going to be a lot probably for a while. So we'll open for questions if we have time, things like that.
Q&A.
And
any good documentaries of any street? Yeah, I mean Oliver Stone's new docuseries that just came out. I mean, the 4-hour one version is coming out, but the 2-hour version
on Showtime now. Yeah,
is on Showtime now. I mean, Oliver, well in the weeds on this new stuff, especially the autopsy of Bethesda, which we have to get into. We haven't even touched the autopsy in Bethesda, and I just want to add one thing about the autopsy in Bethesda, if I can. General Curtis bombs away LeMay. If you have one photo left, Eric, in your arsenal, give me the one photo of Curtis LeMay. The arch nemesis and the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Bay of Pigs is Curtis LeMay. Curtis LeMay said famously, if the Japanese had won, what's that?
He was featuring Dr. Strangelove, right?
That's right. That's the character in Dr. Strangelove. Curtis bombs away LeMay said if the Japanese had won the war, he would have been tried and executed as a war criminal for the firebombing of Tokyo. Mad dog killer, totally crazed lunatic. He disappears the day of the assassination, supposing in a lodge up in Wisconsin, fishing in late November. Okay, maybe he was ice fishing, right? So I don't know what was going on, but he hates Kennedy's guts. Okay. This is newly revealed. The reason I'm mentioning this from Oliver Stone's new documentary. In that documentary, in Bethesda, in the autopsy room, one of the doctors said, what is going on with this cigar smoke? Can somebody please go over to the gallery and deal with this? And an orderly, goes over to the gallery, and sure enough, there is the most arch enemy of JFK, General Curtis Bombs-Away LeMay, smoking a giant cigar almost in a celebratory fashion. And the orderly said, "Sir, the doctors asked me, can you please refrain from smoking in the autopsy room?" And the guy blows a giant smoke cloud in the orderly's face without saying anything. And that was his answer. And the orderly goes back to work on the body of JFK. And that's recently revealed in the Oliver Stone documentary. Nobody knew that he was at the autopsy, and obviously celebrating what happened. And we'll get into that later. I think we've done about an hour and a half today. It was roughly.
Yeah, we've got David is going live at 7:00.
Oh yeah, so I definitely want to catch David, who's an international hero now. I mean, what a job! No, I'm serious. I mean, what's going on up there is breathtakingly evil, and he's in the belly of the beast right now. Become the Abby Hoffman of Canada. And,
an upcoming episode, by the way.
As Barnes said, he doesn't even know who Abby Hoffman is, but we'll
teach him.
We'll teach him in the Abby Hoffman episode, which is upcoming, by the way. A movie project that I try to get made with Oliver. So yeah, I got to go back to bed.
All right, till next time.
I'm fine. I just have a sore throat.
Hit subscribe and like on your way out. Seriously, if you haven't.
Subscribe and tell others. I mean, just stop random people on the street, strangers wearing masks. Who cares? What do you care? Life is short. Tell them to check out America's Untold Stories, because I think for the bang for your buck, and I don't know what anybody's paying for any of this stuff, it's not bad. It's not bad entertainment. I mean, I've been in the entertainment business, for many, many years. This can't be that bad, concerning with CNN and looking what else is out there. I mean, I'm giving you some sort of dots to connect, right, Eric?
We got the dots. We just don't connect them.
We don't connect them.
Till next time, folks. Thank you so much.